There's three different areas of Windows that have changed in going to the Presentation Manager. Our reasons for changing them differ in the three different areas. First of all, in the user interface, there's a variety of changes. You're probably aware now that we've switched from the tiled interface of Microsoft Windows version 1.0 to an overlapped interface in version 2.0 and in the Presentation Manager. We've also changed the keyboard interface. We've done this primarily in response to customer demand. I think since Microsoft came out with its tiled window interface in 1.0, people have been arguing with us, people have been complaining to us that they preferred the overlapped window approach that everybody else has followed. We've now implemented this overlapped window approach because you've asked for it and because some other things have occurred as well. First, when Windows was first developed, overlapped windows were just not as feasible as tiled windows. In an overlapped window system, for example, the screen is repainted very often. When you switch from one application to another application, you're very often having to switch the order of the windows on the screen. To do this, you have to repaint the screen. This is an operation that occurs very frequently. 2 years ago, when Windows was developed, the performance of the systems that were popular at the time, 8088 and 8086-based systems, was just not sufficient enough to make an overlapped window system feasible. Now, with 286 and 386-based systems and with improved graphics algorithms, overlap systems are simply more feasible than they were before. The final reason, as you may be aware, is that IBM has chosen the Presentation Manager interface with overlapped windows as the user interface of choice for SAA, the System Application Architecture. The next area that has changed in going from current versions of Windows to OS/2 Presentation Manager is the API, the Application Programming Interface, the subroutines and functions that you as software developers call from the operating system or to the operating system to perform user interface actions in your software. We've changed the API, for one thing, to improve it. If you look at the API, the way that we interact with things like menu bars, the way that we resize windows, it really is a superior approach to the approach that was followed in previous versions of Microsoft Windows. Another reason why we've changed it is for consistency. Microsoft Windows today, if you look at its different subsystems, its graphical library, the window manager, each one of these subsystems has a slightly different style to it, a different way of returning error values, a different way of coding parameters. We've looked very hard not only at the Presentation Manager, but at OS/2 as a whole, and tried to provide a more consistent fashion. The final reason why we changed the API is simply because this is the most convenient time to do it. In moving from real mode MS-DOS to protected mode OS/2, it was a given that some things like interrupt 21s to call the operating system, writing directly to display memory, would have to change. Protected mode of the 286 does not allow these things to be used inside applications. As long as you were changing your applications to deal with these protected mode requirements, it seemed that this was the best time to make any changes in the Windows API as well. The final area that has changed in the Presentation Manager is the driver layer, the device driver layer, how the graphics library, a device-independent library, interacts with specific devices. The way that the new driver interface works offers much better performance than the previous ways that it has worked, and it's also better able to take advantage of intelligent devices. Devices based on, say, PostScript, devices based on sophisticated graphics chips like the Intel 786 chip or the TI 34010 chip. The new driver interface is much better able to exploit these intelligent devices. Consider now a typical Microsoft Windows screen. First, before talking about what you're seeing here, I'd like to explain this arrow which you see flying about the screen here. This is what's called the mouse pointer. I'll sometimes refer to it as the mouse cursor. It tracks the motions of the mouse as I move it left and right. You'll see that often the mouse pointer changes shape as it goes over sections of the screen that have significant importance. I'll talk about a couple of other things with relation to using the mouse. I'll talk about clicking, by which I mean pressing down on the mouse button. I'll also talk about dragging. By dragging, I mean to press down on the mouse button, to hold it down, to move the mouse somewhere else, and to let it go. The other mouse operation that I'll talk about is double clicking, to click on the mouse button twice in rapid succession. I haven't made any distinction between the left and the right mouse button on the mouse. In general, Windows and the Presentation Manager don't make any distinction between the two. Very well. To go back to what we see on the screen here. Here are three windows. In this case, they correspond to three different applications. From what you can see that Windows is a multitasking system. We have three windows, three applications running on the screen at the same time. What can we do with these windows? First, we can switch from one application to another simply by clicking in the appropriate window. This is the MS-DOS Executive. This is the Microsoft Write application, a word processor. And this is the clock application. We can also move windows around the screen by clicking down on the title bar, holding the mouse button down, and dragging to a new position, then letting go. You can also size windows by doing the same kind of drag operation, but while you're on the border surrounding the windows. Click, drag, and release. Here we've demonstrated Windows' interactive nature, its intuitive, direct manipulation user interface. You don't type cryptic commands, you simply click and drag as you would expect. And we've shown the multitasking nature of Windows. Another way that I could demonstrate the multitasking, for example, is to go down to the Write application, and you can see that even as I type in the word processor, that the clock continues to run. Windows is a multitasking system. I've talked about some very top-level things, how to move windows about, how to size them. How do you do anything with applications? Well, you might have noticed in the yellow areas here of these two different applications a variety of words here that seem a lot like commands, or they seem like they might lead to commands. Well, indeed, what that area is called, it's called the menu bar. The menu bar contains a variety of commands. To execute a command, once more, you do the intuitive thing. You press down on it with the mouse. Let's press down on the View command to see what happens. Underneath it has appeared something which we call a pull-down menu. It's called the pull-down menu because to execute one of the commands on that menu, you pull down to the one you want, and then you release. We've just executed the View Long command, which lets us view the file system in a long format instead of the short format. Let's execute the View Short command. Okay, so you can see how the menu bar is used to select commands inside an application. There's actually another menu bar that you don't see, another pull-down menu that you don't see. To get to that pull-down menu, you click not on the menu bar, but on this icon up here in the upper left-hand corner of the application. This icon is called the control icon. By clicking on it, that leads to the control menu. The control menu is used to duplicate a lot of the functions that can be done directly. For instance, the move command in the control menu can be used to do the same thing that you do by clicking on the title bar and moving a window around. The purpose of the control menu is primarily to operate Windows or the Presentation Manager from the keyboard instead of from the mouse. In most cases, the mouse is the most effective way of using the Presentation Manager. In some cases, however, for instance, when you're in a word processor, it may be inconvenient to move your hands away from the keyboard. You may prefer to do things from the keyboard instead. Let me demonstrate how you would do something like sizing a window from the keyboard. We're in the MS-DOS application, the MS-DOS Executive. To size a window, we bring up the control menu. We do that by pressing Alt and then the space bar. In fact, the shape of the control icon is somewhat like a space bar to act as a mnemonic aid to remember that Alt space is how you get to it. Having brought up the control menu, we can move down with the cursor keys to the size command and press enter. You can see how the mouse pointer has changed to a four-headed arrow. If we press the right arrow, that selects the right border, and now we can move the right border with the arrow keys and press enter. In general, almost everything that you do from the mouse, you can also do from the keyboard. In most cases, the mouse is preferable. However, there are some circumstances where the keyboard is more convenient.